So welcome to this tutorial about how to use the photo transfer paper. This paper is designed to transfer photographs from your home printer to Fabric. I'm going to take you through the process that I use to get my photographs out onto the transfer paper and then onto the Fabric. Obviously there's different ways of doing it, and if you buy photo paper from different places other than from my store, you might have slightly different ways of doing it. So I'll be taking you through how to set up a document on your computer, how to size your images, how to flip them because you need to flip your images to get them to print out the right way around, how to print them, and then how to transfer them onto Fabric. Before we start, I'm just going to go through a couple of rules or information points to introduce you to the paper. The most important one is that this paper is only for inkjet printers, so you can't use laser printers or photocopiers. So that's basically like home printers, an inkjet printer. It is designed for that like home style printing. So if you don't have an inkjet printer, you unfortunately won't be able to use this paper. The second thing is it is an A4 size paper because I'm based in the UK and we have A sizes like quite a lot of Europe. If you're outside of Europe, you might need to cut this paper down to fit into your printer, but that's quite easy. I think the A4 is just slightly bigger than sort of the ones that you use in other countries, so you can just cut it down a little bit so that it will fit into your printer. The other thing is this is all about digital photographs, so you're going to be using digital photographs, but you can obviously scan in old photographs using a home scanner if you've got one. So it doesn't have to just be digital photographs. I use a lot of photographs that are one of my nan's, quite old ones, and I just scan them in using my scanner, and then I can use them as digital photographs. Saying that, you can also use anything that you can get onto the computer screen. So that might be handwritten text, you can do some drawings and transfer that, you can use tickets or logos, basically anything that you can get up on in digital form can go on to these transfers. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our page and insert our photographs that we're going to print out. So I'm using Microsoft Publisher here. This is part of Microsoft Office suite of programs, but you can use anything where you can get an A4 piece of paper up on the screen. That's, for instance, Microsoft Word, something like that. Obviously, if you're doing this in a different country and you're not using A sizes, the paper's A4, and as I've said, you might have to cut the paper down to fit in your printer. In that case, you'd need to get up a sheet of paper on your screen. That's whatever you normally print out at. Okay. So I like to use Publisher for several different reasons. One, it copes with images really well, but also it's really easy to size your photographs because we do need to make sure they're going to be printed out the right size. So I'll show you how I do it. There obviously is different ways, whatever program that you're going to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to insert some photographs, and I should have some here. So we're going to insert these photographs into the document. So here we go, with lots of images here. And what you need to do is bring them over to the main area, and you can drag the image larger to get it to the right size. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we can see. Okay. So if you put it on the corner, obviously it will just make it bigger or smaller. Now, to tell what size it is, Publisher is really handy in that it has this little size box down the bottom here, which is object size. And you can see on this, so this is at the moment 8.38 by 9.34 centimetres. So say I wanted this to be exactly 9 centimetres tall, all I need to do is type 9 in that, and it would change it for me. And it keeps the ratio the same, or you can drag it bigger or smaller until you see 9 centimetres in the box down the bottom. So that's a really, really easy way of getting your photographs the right size. So I'm just going to do that for a couple of these. Now, when you've got them all the right size, you need to arrange them on the page. Now they don't need any space in between each of the images. You can put them really, really close together. Sometimes I like to jigsaw them, to save paper. You can kind of try and fit them all in as best you can. You can see here I haven't just got photographs, I've got a little logo here. That's my studio logo. So you can do a mixture. Basically anything you can get on the computer screen you could print out onto the paper. So it could be, you can scan things in, things like tickets, basically any old photographs, anything you want. So when you've arranged them all on the paper, obviously I would normally fill in all of this space with extra little bits of photographs. But when you've filled your whole piece of paper, then we're going to do the last step, which is to flip all of the photographs. They need to be mirrored so that they print out correctly. Because the photo paper we're using is a transfer, it will flip your images over. So if we select all of the images, and I'm doing that by just bringing my cursor over all of them, but you can click them individually as well. And then what you need to do is come to the picture tools bar, that's up at the top. So when you've selected the picture tools menu will appear. You can click on format, and this tool here is a rotation tool, and if you put flip horizontal, that has just flipped all of those images the right way around. That's all you need to do. On other software, as I've said, there's different ways of doing things. There might be a mirror mode or something like that. You'll just have to do the help menu on whatever software it is to try and find that out. Okay, so we've all ready to print. I've imported all my images to the page. I have resized them, and then I have flipped them as well. So they are all ready to go. So now we're ready to print. So we're going to go File, Print, and just print out the document like you would normally. You don't need to put any special settings in. I usually just let it print out as it is. Obviously you can use photo settings, but you just need to treat it as like a normal sheet of paper. It doesn't have a special coating, which means you need to change any of the settings. So I basically just leave it as it is and just print out on that paper. So the photo paper has two sides. It's got a blank white side, and then it'll have a side with either a grid on or some other writing on. You need to print this onto the white side. So for me, in my printer, I need to put the white side down first, but obviously your printer might be different, and you're just going to print out that document onto the white side of the paper. So when you've printed your document out, you've printed those pictures out on the white side, you then need to cut around your images with some paper scissors. Now at this stage you don't need to leave any white edges round, so just cut exactly at the edge of each of those images. So I'm just cutting around each one so you get all of the separate images out ready to transfer. So when you've cut out all of your images, you're going to then transfer them onto the fabric. So the fabric I'm using is a 100% cotton fabric, so it needs to be cotton, and it needs to have a nice smooth flat weave. So I'm using a poplin here, but anything like a sheeting, anything that's quite flat is going to be great. If you've got quite a bumpy or open weave, obviously the photographs won't transfer flatly, they'll kind of go into the bumps in the fabric. So nice smooth fabric, then you're going to iron it to make sure it's flat, and then you're going to try and remove any threads or linen or anything, any fluff that's got onto that fabric, because it will get trapped in between the fabric and the images. When it's nice and flat, then you're ready to transfer the images over. you need to turn the image over so the image is face down on the fabric, and it's a good idea to try and line it up with the grain of the fabric so that when you cut around it, it doesn't leave frayed edges. I've got my iron on a high heat, but I've turned the steam off. You don't need the steam. And then I'm going to put the iron over it. I'm moving it a little bit just to make sure I've got all the corners, but you want quite a flat press on that. And just make sure you've got all the corners, but you can see it's a very short amount of time you need to do it for. What I'm looking for here is sometimes the ink, if it's quite a dark image, will seep out underneath the paper, and you can just see a little dark line around the outside. That's how you know it's done. I'm also looking to make sure there are no bubbles in the paper, because when it's not done there might be bubbles in it. And then I think it's done. What you need to do then is really, really important that you leave the transfer to cool down. You must not pull it when it's still hot, because you'll get all lines over it. So important, leave it to cool down, and then you can test it by picking off one of the corners and seeing if it's transferred. If it hasn't transferred, put a little bit more heat on it and then wait for it to cool again. But if it has, you can pull the transfer right off, and there we go. You can see it has transferred my image over to the fabric. I'm just going to cut that out. The reason I'm cutting it out now, I'm going to do some more of the transfer to show you that again. But it's really important to cut it out now, because if I put the iron over that by accident, it will melt. And that's a really important thing to remember when you're using it in your projects, that the transfer is a type of plastic, so you have to keep the iron away from it from now on, so after it's been transferred. So that's why I've cut it off, just to move it away, but I will show you a few more here. And now normally I would be doing this, so if I had quite a few photographs, I would cut them all out and I'd place them all on and do them together, just because it's quicker. Obviously if you're learning how to do this for the first time, you might want to do them one at a time to get used to the technique. But I'm doing the same thing with multiple photographs. I'm ironing over, trying to get all of the edges. It's usually the corners that that get missed. I've ironed over them, and then I'll wait for the transfers to cool down before I try and take those off. The one thing to say when you are doing multiple photographs at once is that you will need to leave some space around them. So at this point, we do need some space around each of the photographs, so that you can sew them onto your work without having to sew through the photograph. So I always leave a white border around the outside. So when you're placing multiple photographs down, you need to make sure there's some space between each one. And there we go, we have your all of your images transferred, and you can see that it's really quite a straightforward process. You get your document up, fill it with photographs. You need to remember to flip them over so they're the right way around, so they're all the right size and flipped. You print them out onto the photo transfer paper, and then you're going to iron them onto the fabric. There are some tricky bits in there, and it might take you a few goes to get that right. Things like using the computer can be difficult for people. Also, you need to get used to the settings on your iron, maybe, how long you need to do it. But I love this transfer paper. I find it really easy to use, and it's really easy to get used to it. So I hope you will be able to make fantastic stitch books and celebrate your family photographs with it.